The media only does puff pieces or hit pieces. I'm convinced of it. That's it. There's no more integrity in the media. And I can't really recall a time when there was. That's the sad thing about my generation. Truth is too inconvenient for them to uphold. So if you want the truth, don't look at any of the media outlets and the so-called news sources. They're not interested in keeping you informed for the sake of your well-being or giving you real information. I mean, I just feel like we're living in a time when you can actually bribe the media to do puff pieces on anything. It's called sponsorship and advertising. But come on, I mean, it's almost blatant when they all pretty much carry the same text everywhere.
It looks like a scripted piece of work, right? When all the anchors are using the same sentences.
But it's this, yeah, you're right. It's cheap though. It's the same script. At least get creative with your scripts.
Yeah, the latest very striking example was let's build back better. And this was on everyone's lips on TV. You remember this moment?
But like every other so-called slogan that we're supposed to be brainwashed by, stay at home, it saves lives, I mean, there are like so many of these repetitive words that they were using, slogans that they were using to really get at us. That's how I see it. Am I wrong?
Well, it feels like that because people are then channeled into a certain direction. But the role of the media, I mean, it's not surprising that some people would use the means they have to try to steer people. It's very new, the situation we are currently living. Before, you were only interested in your local life.
Right.
If I think about even 1 or 2 generations before, people were not living very much their villages if they were not living in cities.
Right.
And in Europe, in general, you had 90% of people who were living in the countryside, like peasants. And really going like 50 kilometers trip to a larger city would be probably once in a lifetime.
Right.
And so nobody could lie to you about what's going on. Yeah, you had the direct experience, or you could have access witnesses of what was going on.
But what about the larger world's news? What about far away news?
But nobody was really interested in that. I think.
And how long ago was this?
I think the generation of 2 generations before us.
Right.
Right.
And then over time, I think information just became so vast. It just became more available everywhere. And that became an opportunity somewhere along the way to really inform us in the way that was convenient.
Yes. Are we really informed? That's the question.
That's the question. Is it real information? And that's what I'm arguing. It's not. For example, I don't want to harp on this too much because it's really a troubling piece of news, but the FTX scandal, the mainstream media was treading so carefully because Sam Bankman-Fried, the founder and the CEO, was a big source of funds for media outlets. And when that scandal, and for those of you who don't know, it's the biggest scandal involving a cryptocurrency exchange that was found not only on corruption and mismanagement charges on every level, but losing billions of dollars of their customers' money. So when this was also in meltdown phase and everything was blowing up and the internet, everyone was talking about it, no media outlet ran with the story, at least not accurately. And the only time immediately after the whole internet was on fire with this audacity of Sam Bankman-Fried, who they call SBF, and his cohorts who were hooked on medical drugs, by the way. That's what they did for pleasure. And incompetent as anything, the only interview that SBF gave was to the New York Times, and it was really a joke. Not once in the article did the New York Times mention the fraud or rebuke the corruption of the whole FTX scandal. I mean, wouldn't that be the whole point of the article? In fact, all they could do is highlight this guy's generosity with all the money he gave. And to whom? Well, primarily it was politicians. And of course, oh yes, it was the media. So are we surprised that the New York Times didn't get incensed and get all worked up and write a scathing article on this crime? Is it left to all of the rest of us who then must do our own research and try to go to as many valuable sources of our own in order to learn the truth? That seems to be the only way this day and age.
I think we are going to have to learn how to deal with the media the same way the Soviet citizens were dealing with their media. They didn't have access to a lot of different newspapers. There were two of them. There were Izvestia, the news, and the Pravda, the truth. And they were saying that there's no news in the truth and there's no truth in the news.
Oh, gosh. So they got it. They got it right from the beginning.
Not only they got it, but they got something that I think we should get more, is that when they were reading these newspapers, they were reading them in order not to know what was said, but to really get what was not said.
And to see what was really on the mind of anyone that wants to push any kind of a narrative or an agenda, which is very clever. And that's how we have to look at the news today, is look at the headlines and say, okay, what is it that they're really trying to get at?
So you had this minister or this person who is attacked in the media because he has been not honest, or is attacked for whatever reason. To read it the way, it's not that he's attacked for this and this reason. It's why are they talking about it in the media?
Yeah, that's a great question.
So, cui bono? It's like in all crimes. Who benefits?
Right.
And I think people are not sophisticated enough in general to think along these lines, that these newspapers and these media, they have owners who have agendas. And never anything that goes beyond their agenda, or against their agenda, will be allowed to have some airwave or airtime.
Which we see. We see that all the time. Things get shut down and deleted and canceled if they go against the mainstream narrative. And what's really shocking to me is that the people that buy it will vilify you for saying anything against what's in the mainstream headlines. Yes. So you become the bad guy if you say, no, you know what? I'm not so sure if this is the way it is. I think it should be this way. You will get attacked.
Of course you will. But it's enough to know intimately some journalists to know that they all think the same, So there is this external discourse that we are free and we can write whatever we want or talk about anything. But at the end of the day, there's always an editor.
Yeah.
And you can be as honest as possible. All people who are pushing for the truth or for saying, oh, this is what happened and I really want it, they face an editor who says, we're not going to publish this, and if you push for it, you're out.
So if you don't toe the line, your words will get slashed. And speaking of words, so the New York Times headline said, how Sam Bankman-Fried's crypto empire collapsed. Okay, there's a lot more than it just collapsing. How about the corruption that Sam Bankman-Fried forged into his company? So it was just accolades of his so-called philanthropy, continued investments, political donations, not one single mention of illegal activity, which this story is rife with. That is the story. Such a blatant puff piece, simply shameful. SBF arguably is being called the largest financial criminal in human history, and the New York Times was just oblivious to it. Can't get their finger on it. Pretty appalling. They further gloss over the evil by saying that he continues to play his favorite video games. I mean, what kind of a story is this? The video game, by the way, was Storybook Brawl, which is a game that SBF acquired under FTX. So FTX became the owner of Storybook Brawl, which is a video game, and I don't know anything about it, because he says it helps him to unwind, clear his mind. That's all the New York Times could talk to this guy about during this whole crisis?
It's fascinating. If you could take all the elements of a caricature of our epoch, you would scramble everything into this story. You have the fake enthusiasm for a fake genius whose parents are very politically connected.
Gosh, how many times have we seen that story? That's so ridiculous. It should always actually be a sign of smelling a rat.
Yeah, there's a saying that the devil always shows its tail at one moment. Mm-hmm. But I think there are so many tails showing and people that don't see. So now it's not a tail; it's a whole head.
Yeah,
and if you don't see what's going on, I mean, it has to be that obvious. Drug consumption, absolutely no governance structure into this big company.
Yeah.
Actually, the guy who is in charge of liquidating the company under Chapter 11 bankruptcy laws in the US, he was the one who liquidated Enron.
Yeah.
He said he has never seen such a level of, I mean, it almost says active corruption and willful lack of financial governance and
Imagine. Enron, right? So he was the head of Enron,
liquidation.
Right. Enron's liquidation, which was huge, right? So he's now pointing the finger at SBF
he's now in charge of liquidating
right.
SBF.
And he says this is the biggest crime that he's ever seen. So wow. And yet the New York Times article.
The media are just telling the story of someone very generous, and something happened, and now he's just unable to save the world anymore. It's something that happened. Really, it's like he was struck by lightning, and he's a victim.
It's closer to an advertisement. This New York Times article, really, it's an advertisement. It's a PR piece, puffing up SBF than a critical and expert standard journalism. There's none of that in this. It's not even reporting. It's more of the same game of support those that pay you at any cost, and the cost here is the truth. The cost here is at the lives of these people who lost their money because this guy's criminal corruption was a bigger priority than the average person who trusted his services and their safety.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there is a whole network of inappropriate behavior around this money. So you take people's money, and then we know there was a scam of sending this money as a supposed head to Ukraine to buy armament, but Ukraine then used the FTX as a investment vehicle, and part of this money was then given by the FTX people to both parties actually, but
mostly to the Democrats.
To Democrat, but they claim that they also supported the Republican Party.
Right, which they could have, but I think the numbers I saw was millions to the Democrat, and I saw $10,000 or $50,000. It was like in the thousands to the Republicans. Whatever the case, It's appalling because the story, the more you dig deep, the more you peel those layers and find more and more disturbing information about this whole story that the media has failed to report.
Yes, and from a political point of view, I think the House has put together an inquiry, and many members of this commission who is going to look at what happened have actually received donation from this FTX.
Yeah. No conflict of interest there, right?
And it's just incredible. I mean, it's not only incredible it could happen, it's incredible that it is out there, the information is out there, and there's absolutely no reaction. I put it on par with the fact that, at the beginning when this COVID thing came out, the origin of the virus, there was a huge debate on whether it was a leak from the Wuhan lab, the P4 lab, and because there was some gain of function, so people working on giving some viruses more potency to infect humans in the name of research. And this research had been forbidden to be done in the US by Obama. So Fauci and his crowd, and they sent the research to China. Okay, and so in this Wuhan laboratory, you had this research going on, granted under grants from the U.S. government. And when there was a doubt that this virus that hit the world was coming from a leak from this laboratory, the U.S. commission or the United Nations commissioned a group of people to go and investigate the Wuhan Institute. And amongst the people who were tasked to investigate were the people who were heading this program of gain of function.
There you go.
2 American guys.
There you go. So
this is incredible that you put Al Capone in charge of the tax assessment of the Italian mafia in Chicago, So
it's shocking. SBF, Sam Bankman-Fried, let's not forget that name. It's a very troubling individual, and we must all know that people like that exist. He had clear knowledge of what he was doing was wrong. He had clear intent to deceive, and very real damage was caused as a result. And yet, we have these handpicked media outlets that covered him. People were genuinely cheated and lives were shattered. Meanwhile, the media was trying to actually sanitize his reputation. Another example was Forbes when they did a piece on SBF's ex-girlfriend, who, by the way, was also the CEO of SBF's other company, Alameda Research, who was stealing funds from FTX. So it was all just one big happy party that they were involved in. So the Forbes headline calls her Queen Caroline, the risk-loving 29-year-old. Yeah, risk with other people's money. Embroiled in the FTX collapse. That was the headline. She was aware of the fraud, participated in it, and largely contributed to the wipeout of the billions in customer assets. Yet they start the article off with how she is a math whiz, genius, loves Harry Potter. Oh, and she's also a supporting player of SBF's FTX catastrophe and a new darling of the alt-right. They called her that, which makes absolutely no sense, how she could be the darling of anyone. But the whole story, you could tell, was manipulative. So I guess they got backlash for this title, and they changed it to Queen Caroline, the fake charity nerd girl behind the FTX collapse. Okay, getting warmer. But it's unacceptable the way the media plays with us.
Well, it's just there's only victims in the story.
It's an insult to our intelligence, and it should be an insult to every single human being that opens a newspaper or looks at any media headline on a daily basis. They should be offended.
I guess so many rules and so many common sense rules have been broken that I agree with you.
Before the, after a couple more of these headlines, the Washington Post pretty much did the same thing. Before the FTX collapse, founder poured millions into pandemic prevention. That was what they said. So firstly, don't get me started on the media's horrible role in the pandemic, let alone them touting him the hero. SBF was the hero for pouring millions into pandemic prevention. I'm sorry, that makes me really skeptical. I think it's creepy that he was doing that, because I can tell you I don't think it was in the interest of people. And the dirt on how they have hurt so many during the lockdown and vaccine misinformation. So if they're getting behind someone like that, I'm skeptical right away. So no, it's not just misinformation. It's blatantly forcing people into situations that no one was telling them the truth about during the pandemic. And so now they're touting SBF as a hero for putting millions into pandemic prevention. But anyway, that's for another time. Secondly, what was his role in this so-called pandemic prevention that he funded? I think we can all assume pretty much the worst of this guy. Anyway, then they had this headline changed to FTX failure dooms founder's effort to prevent another pandemic. So this guy has hurt so many people in the interest of himself and his rich friends, and we want him to be the one to prevent another pandemic, according to this article, when likely that's code word for getting us good again. Like, are we that stupid that we're going to trust this man to be our pandemic prevention expert after what he's done?
I mean, at the end of the day, you have the heroes you deserve. And when you live in a fantasy world with Marvel, and we are presented things like, oh, come on, Superman made a bad investment. And now poor guy has no means to save you.
Yeah, poor guy, he lost the millions he was actually going to spend to do pandemic prevention for us. He was such a superhero to us.
Maybe we should bail him out, right? So when I compare the situation of someone who has made a mistake in his tax returns and is being persecuted by the IRS and the tax authorities and can go to prison because of an honest mistake, and you compare the treatment of this person to the treatment of this other person.
Yeah. Where they're saying horrible things happened to him. No, he got caught doing horrible things.
Yes. It seems to me that there is almost playing with fire. because I don't think people are going to stay long oblivious of this different treatment and this lack of justice and proportion. And it's just like I put it in your face that I can do whatever I want and I have no consequence.
But it's a clear message that money speaks, because this guy's money's still working for him. He's still got the media on his side who's trying to clean up his reputation and spin stories to his favor.
But it has reached such a level of indecency. At least you could say they were crooks in the past and rich people who were playing with money and were doing shadow things, but at least they were not parading in the first page of the media and putting in the face of people and saying, we do whatever we want.
Yep.
And we tell it just the way we want, and you cannot do anything about it. It's like a provocation to me. And I don't think people will stay long silent in front of this abuse. It's too blatant.
I agree. I totally agree. I think something's going to have to give. Something has to come crashing on their faces.
So things are becoming so obvious now, with no apology, no attempt to hide the reality of things, that it's either the arrogance of the people in charge of the media in particular has reached such proportion that they have totally lost ground, and they think that they are in this position forever and there will be never a backlash, or it is done on purpose to create a reaction, and it can only lead to a destruction of society.
And if you're still not convinced that the media is not interested in the truth and they're not interested in your well-being or informing you of things so that you can make better decisions, which they're not. They don't care, by the way, about us. Let's take one more headline. Reuters headline was Sam Bankman-Fried did the financial system a favor. Do you remember that one? I think you and I saw it together. Mm-hmm. Rather than any of them focusing on the fact that this corruption towers over the all-time scandalous organized accounting fraud of Enron, the FTX crime is far more devious than that. And we have to hear anything but about the crime, the actual crime that was committed. We have to hear that Sam Bankman-Fried did a favor to the financial system. So as you can see, the media is working for whatever their interest lies. We use SBF as the case study here, but really, I mean, fill in this blank with anyone else, right? With any other topic. Any headline that you saw today, just plug it into here. Plug in any of the previous headlines: lockdowns, COVID, vaccines. How about war? How about economic crisis that they want to keep scaring us through? What about climate change? All these headlines and all these panic buttons that they keep pushing in the masses is for a reason. And that reason is not truth, and that reason is not for the greater good of us. And I mean, who are they doing a favor in painting pictures like, Math Whiz and Harry Potter fans and do-gooder pandemic preventer, who just made a couple of mistakes along the way. It's appalling. The media continues to prove itself to be dishonest, corrupt, and an unworthy machine of lies who have little or no value in our lives. People get jail sentences for much less than that.
Yes, and really painting the thief as a hero because he stole your car and he did a favor to you because you could have had an accident with it. It's really astonishing.